On GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. As Boris Johnson meets with world leaders in Bavaria, there's plenty of problems waiting for him when he gets home. Today we're talking about strikes again, at the barristers this time, and shortening the school week. What would you think about your child being home every Friday? And I have a fascinating interview with Dame Margaret Hodge after 50 years in politics. She's sick of today's schoolboy politics and thinks the public are too. All that after your news with Rosie.
Good afternoon, it's 12 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. G7 leaders meeting in Germany say they'll continue working together to meet Ukraine's needs for military and defence equipment. Well, it's after an address by the Ukrainian president via video link this morning in which he asked for help with grain exports for reconstruction and military aid. EU diplomats say President Volodymyr Zelensky also wants to end the war before winter sets in. Speaking from Bavaria, Boris Johnson told broadcasters President Zelensky has no option but to continue to defend his country from Russian aggression.
There is no deal that the President Zelensky can really do. So in those circumstances, the G7 supporters of Ukraine around the world have to continue to help the Ukrainians to rebuild their economy, to get their grain out, to export their grain. And, of course, we have to help them to protect themselves.
The Environment Secretary, George Eustice, told us that getting Ukraine's food out via the Black Sea is now considered too dangerous.
The alternative would be to try to find a way of getting it out by land, probably by rail, but that would include and require some investment in repairing some of the rail infrastructure. So it is a challenge. We know as well that the Russians have been stealing some Ukrainian wheat, so the UK is also making available the technology we have to test for provenance so that we can make sure that the Russians aren't able to sell that stolen wheat on the international market.
NHS patients in England who've been waiting more than 2 years for surgery, they're being offered the option to travel to alternative hospitals to receive quicker treatment. The NHS says it will cover travel and accommodation costs to patients where appropriate. Well, more than 400 have agreed to do that and 140 have booked in for surgery at a different hospital. NHS Chief Executive Amanda Pritchard says staff are now back on track to eliminate 2-year wait lists by the end of July. The body of a woman's been found in the wreckage of a house which was destroyed in a gas explosion in Birmingham last night. The man who was rescued is in a life-threatening condition in hospital. Witnesses describe finding the man trapped against a fridge before helping him out on a mattress. Martin Ward-White from West Midlands Fire Service told us the woman's body was discovered overnight. Barristers have gathered outside courts across England and Wales as they strike over legal aid funding. They're refusing to accept new cases or step in for colleagues whose cases are overrunning. The Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab, says the strikes are regrettable and will only delay justice for victims. Well, QC Richard Atkins, head of Chambers at St Philip's, read out a statement saying the government is guilty of neglect.
Our system of justice, which is the envy of the world, gradually over time has become starved of resources. Those who practice in crime are treated with contempt by government. Now the very future of our criminal justice system is in jeopardy. It has been abandoned and neglected for far too long.
More rail strikes will take place this week as a dispute over pay, jobs and conditions continues. Members of the drivers' union ASLEF on the Croydon tram link will strike on Tuesday and Wednesday. It follows 3 days of industrial action last week where thousands of rail staff walked out. Well, ASLEF is urging the Mayor of London to intervene after tram drivers were offered a pay rise of 3%. Boris Johnson says changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol could be implemented as early as this year. MPs are going to vote today on whether to give ministers powers to override parts of the post-Brexit trade deal. The Prime Minister says removing checks on goods travelling from Great Britain to Northern Ireland will help safeguard the Good Friday Agreement. Shadow Secretary for Northern Ireland, Peter Kyle, says Labour will be voting against the bill as it breaks international law.
2 years ago, Boris Johnson negotiated this deal. He was the one that proposed it to the European Union, insisted it be part of the deal and negotiated it into the treaty. He then said it was a great deal for the British public and British businesses. And then in the manifesto that he stood on, that he drafted and he put to the people, he said there would be no renegotiation. And now they're seeking to break the law.
It's been confirmed that the Queen travelled to Scotland for the royal family's traditional week of events. Her Majesty's already taken part in the historic ceremony of the Keys in Edinburgh, accompanied by the Earl and Countess of Wessex. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to the briefing with Gloria.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, we'll bring you the latest from the G7 in Germany as leaders try to present a united front on Ukraine and Boris Johnson calls to action to get grain out of the country as prices soar. The Prime Minister faces pressing problems when he returns home, the cost of living and strikes, of course, but also how to stay in office as Tory MPs plot his downfall after Friday's double by-election defeat. I'm joined by Red Wall Conservative MP Brendan Clark-Smith to discuss what needs to happen now. Last week it was railway workers, this week it's barristers on strike. Ed Crawford is at Ipswich Crown Court for us. And what would you think of your children having every Friday off school? The public have called for a debate on this. I'll talk with Labour MP Catherine McKinnell, who will open that debate today. And my Real Me interview is with Dame Margaret Hodge. She says she originally came into politics to stay sane while changing nappies. She's heartily sick of today's schoolboy politics and has no regrets about calling Jeremy Corbyn an anti-Semite. The G7 summit is in full swing in the Bavarian Alps in Germany. President Zelensky has today urged world leaders to help bring the war in Ukraine to an end. Our reporter Paul Hawkins joins us from Garmisch in Germany now. Paul, good to see you. What's happening there today?
So far today, Gloria, probably the biggest thing to talk about is Volodymyr Zelensky's video address to the G7 leaders. He made a list of demands which frankly were no surprise, asking for reconstruction aid, anti-aircraft defence systems, help on grain exports, security guarantees, and also that he wishes to intensify sanctions against Russia. He also said that he wanted the war to be over by the winter, and that's why he needed these weapons, this money, the heavy weapons as well, because Russia, of course, making significant gains in the Donbass region. In the last few minutes, the leaders have issued a joint statement. They're having a meeting around the table at the moment. They've said we will continue to provide financial, humanitarian, military and diplomatic support and stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. As we do so, we commit to demonstrating global responsibility and solidarity through working to address Russia's aggression, especially on the most vulnerable. Now, in terms of trying to cut off Russia's sources of revenue. The UK, US, Japan and Canada have already said that they're going to put a ban on Russian gold imports, gold being Russia's second biggest export. We also hear that they're talking about a cap on the price of Russian oil, so that's currently being discussed, and potentially, this is according to AFP, quoting a White House source, they're also talking potentially about using the money from higher trade tariffs on Russian exports to fund aid in Ukraine, which would be quite a novel development. So a range of issues are being discussed. There are also the leaders of India, Indonesia, Argentina, South Africa and Senegal here today. They've been invited by Germany to come along. And interestingly, this is just a line looking ahead to the G20 in November. Both the EU and Germany have not ruled out attending that summit hosted by Indonesia, who have also invited, and that invite is still on the table, Vladimir Putin. So you can imagine what the optics of that will look like with Vladimir Putin at the table at the G20 in November. We should also stress, though, Volodymyr Zelensky has been invited to that as well. So that should be very interesting to see the G7 leaders round the table with Vladimir Putin in November, if indeed that is going to happen.
Really interesting. Thank you for that update, Paul. Thank you. So the Prime Minister may be out of the country at the G7, but back home there is trouble brewing after Friday's double by-election defeat. Many of his own MPs are plotting to get rid of him. Can he survive the latest assault? Well, I'm delighted to be joined by Conservative MP for Bassetlaw, Brendan Clark-Smith. Brendan, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for your time. The Prime Minister says he hopes to stay in power till the mid-2030s. It's not clear he's going to finish his first term of office, is it?
Well, I hope he stays in office until then as well. I think he's going to stay in office. I think he's going to fight this off. And of course, we're only 2.5 years into government after that brilliant win in 2019. We've had a pandemic, and I think the PM deserves a bit of time to actually get that agenda sorted and deliver on the things that we actually promised that we'd do.
How did you feel when you saw the by-election results on Friday morning?
It's always disappointing to lose by-elections. I'm not going to dress that up, but of course, as a sitting government in mid-term, you would expect to be losing these kind of things. It's not particularly unusual for that to happen. Governments lose these seats, then they go back again at the next general election. I think if you look at both of those results, again, whilst it's disappointing, if you look at the circumstances of both, what happened with both the previous MPs, very difficult situation for us there. And of course, while Labour won one of those by-elections and the Liberal Democrats won the other one, conversely, they both lost their deposits as well in the other seats, which I think people have maybe forgot to mention. Of course, Labour came second in Tiverton and Honiton last time around at the general election. And this time we're way out. So unless they've given that up, whether there's some pact they're forming with the Lib Dems now that some have mooted, is that going to be a formal arrangement? Who knows? But certainly in terms of us losing the by-elections, it's not a great surprise, but it's about picking ourselves up, dusting ourselves off and getting on with it.
Are you disappointed that the party chairman didn't see it that way and resigned? Do you know why he resigned?
Well, I think as party chairman, sometimes you can take things a little personally, and of course you're responsible for quite a lot in terms of running the party and campaigning, and I'm sure that he felt some responsibility towards that. The party chairman, Oliver's a really good man. I think he did a good job. He did a great job in culture before that as well, and he's very highly thought of within the party. So I'm sad to see him go, but I think from his letter, there was no blame of the PM there, and was talking about that change that we're trying to deliver. So whilst it's sad to see him go, as we say, the show must go on.
The Rebels, Boris Johnson's opponents, are planning to change the rules that govern your leadership elections so they can trigger a fresh vote of no confidence. What's your message to the plotters?
Yeah, I think changing the rules as you go along never goes down particularly well. And I think we saw that when we had a previous by-election, if people remember, when rules were tried to be changed there with something. So we've had a vote of no confidence. Some of my colleagues who didn't vote for the Prime Minister have even said themselves, OK, we've had the vote, we've cleared the air. we want to get on with it now. We want to look at the issues. I don't think politicians navel gazing, talking about themselves and infighting is what people really want to see, to be honest. And certainly I'd be against changing those rules. I'd like to keep it as it is and get on with it. If people do change it and we do have the chance to have another vote, then I'm sure the Prime Minister would win that again. But of course, it's a difficult time for the Labour Party as well. We don't know what's going to happen with the fine with Durham. So I'd just say, let's hold our horses and see what happens there as well.
What do you make of the reports that there's 6 Tory MPs who are thinking about defecting to the Labour Party?
Yeah, I'm not too sure about this, Gloria. As I say, without names, there've been articles like this that have been out before. I think there's some really random names that were pulled out the hat before. People have suggested, oh, Brendan, you're a Red Wall MP, are you one of them? I think one of my colleagues, Lee Anderson, they said, oh, is he going to go, and obviously they don't know his history with the Labour Party as we do, Gloria. So, there's some really strange ones being thrown out there. And really, I don't think, this 6 number is really credible. Again, some people perhaps unhappy, but for me as a politician, with conviction, why would you cross the floor? I look why I went into politics. It's not to protect my job as a politician. It's because I have principles to stand for, and if you're a Conservative with those principles, surely you stick where you are and you try and change things if you're unhappy.
There's one thing that Boris Johnson could do to stop all the noise. He could call a general election. He could renew his mandate with the British people, or seek to renew his mandate with the British people. What do you think about that?
He could do, yes. I suppose was it Brenda in Bristol say, oh no, not another one again if we did. But I think we've had quite a lot of elections. People are a bit fed up of politicians calling them. That'll be, in 2017, 2019, 2022, I think is a bit much. So first of all, they want us to get a grip of the economy. They want us to make sure we keep a handle on inflation. They want us to sort out their energy bills. They want to make sure that they're obviously in a job and paid well. They don't want to see another election. What would it change? It wouldn't change the global situation. Same as if we changed leader. They'd still be faced with the same global challenges everybody else has got. So an election wouldn't solve anything. Changing leader wouldn't solve anything. But what would solve things, I think, is pulling together really and pushing in the same direction.
Always good to talk to you. Thank you, Brendan Clark-Smith, Bassett MP. Cheers. During the pandemic, many industries incurred delays and setbacks, not least the criminal court service, which now has a record backlog of cases waiting to be heard. Barristers are striking across England and Wales in a dispute over pay and conditions. Our East of England reporter Ed Crawford has more.
Hello, good afternoon. Yes, I'm outside of Ipswich Crown Court because today is the first day of the criminal barrister strike action. Now, the barristers are holding a walkout today and tomorrow, and they'll be adding a subsequent day each week for walkouts, culminating in their final strike protest, where it will be 5 walkout days in a row. Now, these protests or strikes come in response to the government's inaction, or what they see as the inaction, to implement a report's findings. So back in November, a report was submitted to the Ministry of Justice by Sir Christopher Bellamy, and within that report, that 160-page document, it recommended a 15% rise in legal aid. And on top of that, that the legal aid should be reviewed every year. Now, the delay with the government implementing the recommendations has led the Criminal Bar Association, known as the CBA, to accuse ministers of dragging their feet in implementing the recommendations. And it's this delay which has spurred the barristers to take matters into their own hands. Now, as we know, there is already a substantial backlog in the courts, and these protests or strikes threaten to make it worse. In fact, the most recent figures from Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Services show there were more than 350,000 outstanding cases in the Magistrates' Courts and more than 58,000 outstanding cases in the Crown Courts. Now, I wanted to speak to a barrister who supported the protest movement, so I went and spoke to Simon Spence QC about the impact the pandemic is having on the court system, the backlog, and why is there an employment crisis within the court system?
Backlog is currently 60,000 or thereabouts. It's in the high 50s. What people don't appreciate is that even before the courts closed, they weren't running to maximum capacity because of underinvestment. So there was already in the system a 30,000 backlog of cases. That has now doubled because of COVID, and also because, although the courts have reopened, they're still not operating at full capacity. Barristers are leaving the profession in droves because they're not able to make a decent living from the work they do. And they're finding alternative sources of employment, either different areas of law which are privately paid, or leaving the law altogether. And we're getting to a crucial point where there isn't sufficient manpower, either in terms of lawyers, judges and court staff. So even if you wanted to go back to full capacity, there aren't enough people to do it. And we think...
Now, Mr. Spence's remarks were also echoed by the CBA, who said the chronic underfunding of the criminal justice system has led to an alarming exodus of criminal barrister lawyers, and that this exodus has put the industry on the teeter of destruction. In the light of the barristers' demands, the Government Justice Minister James Cartledge had agreed to a £7,000 pay increase for the barristers to be implemented as soon as September. He further went on to say, "We encourage the Criminal Barrister Association to work with us rather than escalate to unnecessary action, as it will only serve to harm victims as they are forced to wait longer for justice." So with no clear conclusion in sight, it seems like the barristers will be taking their fight from the courtroom to the picket line.
Ed Crawford, thank you very much indeed. MPs are debating a public petition to reduce the school week to 4 days instead of 5. I'll talk with Labour MP Catherine McKinnell, who is the chair of the Public's Petition Committee and who will open today's debate on behalf of the public. Before that, let's take a look at your weather.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio,
On digital, absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. Most Monday afternoons, politicians debate petitions that the public have launched and which have been signed by at least 100,000 people. Today, they will be debating a petition calling for schools, wait for it, to make Friday a part of the school weekend. So the school week would be 4 days and the weekend would be 3. Well, I'm joined by Labour MP Catherine McKinnell, who will be opening this debate in the Commons on behalf of the public. So, Catherine, requiring schools to make Friday a day off school, parents will be apoplectic, won't they? Although they've probably demanded it.
Well, I think a lot of parents would worry about, well, obviously primary school children, who's going to look after them, but also older children. You know, are they going to spend that day doing productive things? Is there going to be someone home for them? So I think there's a lot to consider. But really where I started when I saw this debate was the number of people that signed it and how quickly. And I thought, gosh, they're trying to say something here, we should listen. So I spoke to teachers, I spoke to health professionals, and I spoke to young people themselves. And what came across really clearly was this is not a whimsical request. This is a cry for help. There are so many young people who just feel so stressed out. And really, they're children, they're young people, and it shouldn't be as stressful as this to be at school. So my solution that I'll be proposing this afternoon, spoiler, is I don't support the reduction to 4 days, and actually the vast majority of young people I spoke to don't support it either.
Interesting.
But what they want is more breathing space, more fun at school, more of the things they love, and for the curriculum to be less intense.
Interesting, because at the moment most of the political debate really is following COVID and the damage that was done to children's education. It's really mostly a call for more time in school. So this sort of feels at odds with the prevailing wisdom, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I spoke to mental health professionals that say they've had an 80% increase in referrals to them since the pandemic. So I actually think this is come from the pandemic. I think young people have really struggled at home, struggled with the isolation, but now they're struggling to readjust to that intensity of being back at school. And I think we need to just invest so much more in mental health support. I think every school should have someone that young people can turn to for help. I think as well, though, we need more investment and support for the fun stuff, art, drama, sport, to try and break up the day a little bit more for young people, but also just put a bit of spring in their step in the morning, that they know at least at some point in the day they're going to be doing something they love. And I think that will help young people feel more positive about going to school. I think the other thing, though, young people are under enormous pressure, and our school system, where we rank really highly internationally, is the stress of young people and the stress that they're under. There's a horrible statistic that we are the 5th highest ranking country in the world where girls feel a fear of failure. And so they're worried, they're under pressure, they're worried about the future, they feel all the pressures that their parents feel, and they feel this extra pressure at school as well, and teachers are under pressure as well. So I think school just doesn't feel like a fun place for a lot of young people, so some of them want to be at home. But there are major issues, I think, with being at home. There are some people for whom being at school is the only place where they get a good meal.
Yeah.
Also, home isn't a safe place for everyone, so being at school is, a safe place to be. So really what we need to focus on is not, I think, reducing the time at school, but making it a more quality, enjoyable experience for young people.
You've thought about this a lot, clearly, and it's the public petition which has led you to consider all these things. So in that sense, they work because you've clearly considered why they have had so many signatories. My question is a broad one. When it comes to these petitions, it is possible to wonder what the point is, given that before this petition has even been debated, the government has said we have no plans to require schools to make Friday part of the weekend. Regular attendance at school is vital for children's education, well-being and long-term development. So already the government have said, thanks for the petition, we're not listening.
Well, we're going to put the government on the spot today, where there's an opportunity, not just in writing, but they're going to have to say to MPs' faces where they stand on this and what they're going to do, not just about the petition itself, so the 4-day week request, but about school generally. How are they going to invest? How are they going to help children catch up again after the pandemic? How are they going to reduce that stress that young people are feeling post-pandemic? What are they going to do to introduce more capacity funding support time to do more fun stuff at school and make sure that it's not just those more wealthy families that can afford it outside of school, but every family in school, every young person gets a chance to do all of the things they enjoy. And I do think some of that's missing at the moment because it's all so intense. I mean, some of the testimonies from young people's heartbreaking. As they walk into school, they feel that all their skin get itchy and they just feel so stressed. I heard from so many young people. And I just think there's something wrong where we haven't got time in the curriculum, for example, to teach people life-saving swimming skills that would take half an hour in total. Too many people don't learn it. So I think we really need to take a good, hard look at not just the educational outcomes, but the time that people are spending in school and how much they're developing as people and not just academically.
OK, final question. We've only got about 30 seconds left. Professor Sir John Curtis is the polling expert. His reaction to the Wakefield Labour win. Wakefield provides less than decisive evidence of a new enthusiasm for Labour. You won, but there's not much enthusiasm for Labour, says John Curtis.
So obviously I don't agree. I think that, we've come back from one of the worst defeats in history 3 years ago. We've made huge progress since then. I think Labour still has a lot of work to do to set out what we're going to do in government and what we stand for, what we're going to deliver. But I think we've come a huge way. All the local election results show it. These by-election results show it. I think, we've got every chance that we will be in government and we need to show what that Labour government will be.
Catherine McKinnell, Labour MP, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for coming in. Now, my real me today, the interview is with Labour's Dame Margaret Hodge. She came into politics, she says, to keep her sane while changing nappies, but after 28 years as an MP, she's thoroughly fed up of today's school by politics, and she stands by calling Jeremy Corbyn an anti-Semite. All that after your news.
It's 12:30. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Now, G7 leaders meeting in Germany this morning say they'll continue working together to meet Ukraine's needs for military and defence equipment. Well, first thing, there was an address by the Ukrainian president via video link in which he asked for help with grain exports, reconstruction and military aid. EU diplomats say Volodymyr Zelensky also said he wants to end the war before winter sets in. In Birmingham, the body of a woman's been found in the wreckage of a house which was destroyed in a gas explosion last night. A man who was rescued is in a life-threatening condition in hospital. Barristers have gathered outside courts across England and Wales as they strike over legal aid funding. They're refusing to accept new cases or to step in for colleagues whose cases are overrunning. Justice Secretary Dominic Raab says the strikes are regrettable and will only delay justice for victims. NATO will increase the number of its forces at high readiness to over 300,000. Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg confirmed this to reporters ahead of a NATO summit in Madrid later this week. The NATO response force so far has some 40,000 troops. A summit's taking place in Scotland to look at ways to tackle an increase in protests outside abortion clinics. The Scottish Green MSP, Gillian Mackay, has proposed a bill to put a 150-metre buffer zone outside clinics, aiming to prevent what she described as intimidation and harassment. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says today's event is an important opportunity to reaffirm women's autonomy and right to choose. The Transport Select Committee is going to investigate what it will take to get self-driving cars out on our roads. MPs will assess safety issues, how they would interact with other road users, including pedestrians, cyclists and conventional vehicles. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now, shortly we'll be back to the briefing with Gloria.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio,
On digital, absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
My Real Me interview today is with Labour's Dame Margaret Hodge. After 28 years as an MP, she's thoroughly fed up of today's schoolboy politics, and she has no regrets about calling Jeremy Corbyn an anti-Semite. Margaret Hodge, you've been an elected representative for 50 years. You've been an MP for 28 years. The next election, you're standing down. How does it feel to say goodbye to all that?
Scary. It's scary to think I've done 50 years in something that I thought was just going to keep me busy when the kids were little. But, and it's sort of, I describe politics to some people as a sort of drug, you know, that you go in with all these values and you want to change the world. And there have been times in my life when I've tried to give up politics and move on to other things, and it didn't quite work. So I'm going to keep in there being busy, but and I'm, you know, you never lose that determination to change the world and make it a better place. But also, I feel deeply privileged. So, you know, lots of things that I've done and been a part of in my life has been you know, amazing. If my immigrant dad were alive today, he'd be gobsmacked that his daughter had become such a figure in the establishment, really. And so there's that to go on. And I think the other thing I sort of feel when I reflect back on the 50 years, and you talk to, I love being with younger people. I love mentoring the up-and-coming brilliant new MPs, particularly the women MPs who are in Parliament today. But there is a lot that they're doing now. I think, oh God, I've been there, I've done that, we tried this one, it didn't quite work. So you try to share that without in any way being patronising and saying, we knew it better, we've done that, move on.
On that point, you just reminded me of how helpful you were when I was preparing, when I was an MP, for any questions, and you sat down and you said to me, what do you think? And I was like, oh my gosh, am I allowed to say what I think rather than repeat these lines? It was incredibly helpful. Why did you get into politics?
Well, it's a completely crazy thing, but I started having babies in 1971.
How old were you?
I was in my 20s. So it was young. In those days, you were expected to stay at home for the first 5 years of the child's life. And my job before had been international research. I speak lots of languages, so I was doing international research. And I just couldn't carry on doing that job and having babies. And I thought that all I ever wanted to do was be a mum and have loads of children. That was sort of my vision of myself. And then I do remember ringing my older sister up when my oldest child was 6 weeks old and saying, I can't stand this. This is just getting out the boob and feeding. There must be more to life than that. And I realised, much as I love my children, and I've had 4 children, it wasn't enough. And I was a member of the Labour Party, and a friend of mine in the Labour Party, I then got pregnant with my second child, and a friend of mine in the Labour Party said to me there was a vacancy on the council. Go on, Margaret, go for it. It'll keep you sane whilst you're changing nappies. So I got into representative politics to keep me sane whilst I was changing nappies, and the rest is history.
Blimey. So that's
Crazy,
a warning
isn't it?
to any, or an inspiration to any parent out there that's currently changing nappies. Maybe politics is for you. We're going to talk about some of your memories of those of a time in politics, but actually, you've had your share of trauma. You lose your mum to stomach cancer when you are 10 years old. How vivid are those memories? How long do the scars of that take to heal?
Well, death has been a big part of my life because my mum died when I was 10. My husband died far too young, in his 60s. My daughter-in-law was killed in a car accident 5 years ago, and she had 3 little children. So, and my brothers died. So it's been a lot of my life. I think what is interesting, I mean, I've learned, I think about death a lot, and I think one of the things I really do think about is that all your todays and tomorrows are all connected to your yesterdays, if that makes sense to you. So that all the memories of people who you've loved in the past stay with you in your present and in your future. But my mum's death it would never happen like that today. So I was never, she died of cancer, she was in hospital. It was actually Christmas Day with the day she died. And I woke up in the morning and we had somebody who was helping in the house because she'd been in hospital a lot, and she came and she said, "Your mum's really ill." And I thought, oh, I'm expected to cry. I remember thinking, oh, I'm expected to cry. So I cried, and then I looked out of my bedroom window and saw the car coming down the road. And I thought, oh, they're bringing her home. And you weren't allowed in those days to go to the funeral. So I know. So although I knew intellectually she died, emotionally, I think it took me years to really understand she got. I kept thinking maybe she's in a nursing home, you know, as a kid as well. Maybe she'll come through the window. I remember waking up thinking she'll come through the window, she's there. So that was hard. And I think when my grandchildren had to deal with the very, very sudden death of their mother, who was killed when she was out jogging by a car, I was really conscious when talking to my son is, you know, they've got to know, they've got to come to the funeral, they've got to see the coffin so that they really understand death. So it's been a big part of my life, and a sad part of my life in what has otherwise been an incredibly full, privileged, and interesting professional life. And actually, you know, I've had fun elsewhere, but it's been, lots and lots of things gone wrong. Death has been a big thing that influenced me. And I think there's another really interesting thing. When you think about people who go into politics, there's often something among their parents, which is a tragedy, you know, a parent with alcohol problems or a death or something like that. And I think that what that leaves you with, this is me being a bit psycho,
babbly.
Yeah. What it leaves you with is you have to somehow prove yourself to the external world. And that might be why in this very public work that we do as politicians, that, you know, we feel we need to get recognition and understanding from the outside world. I don't know if there's anything in that, but it's extraordinary when you talk to political colleagues, how many of them have faced something in their childhood.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the biggest high that you've had in serving as an elected representative for 50 years. What's the big achievement or the big moment or the big joy?
Do you know, lots of people say, you're often asked that, and because I've been around for so long, it's so difficult. So I've got lots of highs. I mean, I think my high was 2010, when I absolutely smashed the British National Party in my constituency in Barking. And just to put a bit of history into that, in 2006, the BNP stood for council seats in Barking and Dagenham, and they stood 12 candidates, and every candidate was elected. So if they'd stood 52 candidates, we would have had a British National Party council, the first one in the UK. So it was a serious threat, and not unlike the Red Wall today. There was sort of, it was a constituency where it'd been a white working class constituency. I always say when I arrived there, I'd never met so many great grandmothers who lived within 10 minutes of their great grandchildren. A very close East End community, and through right to buy, when housing got privatised, that led to a massive, rapid change in the demographic makeup of the constituency. And today we reflect any London constituency with absolutely every community you can think of. But living through that change is very difficult for a stable community. So you could understand how people with their, neighbours change, the food in the shops change, the children at the school change. Change is difficult for any of us to absorb, and that was exploited by these fascist British National Party to ill purpose. So beating them off, actually literally, I think, politically annihilating them, they've disappeared as a political force since then, was a great high for me. But I've got other great highs in my life. When I was in Islington, I was a councillor in Islington for 20 years. And again, when I became, at a very young age, I chaired the Housing Committee. And I was absolutely determined that everybody, it's part of the equality agenda, equalising life chances. People should have a decent home at a price they could afford. So we built the biggest housing programme in the whole country. Overnight, we'd come into it was an old council that had never built council houses or anything. And we've got these wonderful Georgian houses all over Islington, which fortunate because they hadn't built council houses, they'd never slum cleared them and created horrible council estates. So we had these Georgian houses that we were able to municipalise, and we created fantastic housing. You couldn't tell from the front door whether it was council owned or privately owned, which for me is what my form of socialism is all about. And it stood the test of time. So I'm really proud of that. And then I'm recently proud of a really difficult period in my life, and that was fighting anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And that was, I joined the Labour Party. I'm an immigrant. I came here at the age of 4. My children are the first generation in our family who haven't had to flee from the country in which they're born because of persecution. That is quite something. And I joined the Labour Party, much to my dad's fury, because I saw it as the party that fought racism, promoted equality, and was international in its perspective. And then to find, when Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party, that anti-Semitism, which had always been there at the fringes of the party, was suddenly moved to the mainstream. To find that, and to find my party that I'd been a member of since I was 18, infected with anti-Jew hatred and racism, was more than I could bear. But I could have run away. I chose not to. I've always been a fighter, and I chose to take on the battle and fight to get rid of it out of the party. So I'm really proud of, there were a lot of people, particularly women, they were the ones at the heart of all this, who joined with us. You did too. Joined with us to fight the anti-Semitism, and I'm proud of that. And in a funny way, because I lived through militant in the 80s and then Corbynism in 2015. In the 80s, it took us a long time to get rid of the militant influence, the extreme left in the Labour Party. I think this time round, because it was so pernicious, because this anti-Jew hatred was at the heart of how they had chosen to identify themselves. It was their choice. It's gone much more quickly, and the Labour Party is now, it takes a long time to change a culture, it takes a long time to rebuild the trust of the Jewish community, but we're much further along that road than I thought we might be so soon after 2019.
And it was reported that you actually went up to Jeremy Corbyn and called him an anti-Semite to his face. Do you think that was fair?
Yeah. I've known Jeremy Corbyn forever, because I was a local authority representative in Islington. I was leader of Islington Council when he became the MP for North Islington. So I've known him forever. In the early days when I knew him, I always we got on fine. He was much more interested in what was happening in Nicaragua than he was in what was happening in Islington. So that was fine. He left me alone. We left each other alone. That was fine. And actually, when he first became leader, I have never supported his politics, his extreme left politics, his hatred of the West and his enchantment of the East, his worldview of, Russia is good and America is bad, or his attitude to capitalism. I've never supported that, but I never thought of him as an anti-Semite. I really didn't. In fact, journalists in the early days would say to me, Jeremy Corbyn's anti-Semitic, and I'd say, no, I don't think he is. But first of all, as things emerged from what he had supported and done at the mural, the famous mural, which is, you'd look at for 2 seconds and you see it's anti-Semitic, and he had tried to keep it there when the authorities were trying to put it down. He's choosing to be at the wreath laying with people who'd been guilty of the terrible assassination of Jews, calling Jews, you'd have no sense of history and no sense of irony. There was just so much that came. And then I think that the way he dealt with that sort of anti-Semitism was just awful. He refused to accept the definition that every other public institution had accepted of what anti-Semitism was. He refused to take seriously the horrible, horrible, horrible abuse that I and others were receiving. I mean, if I just told you in a 2-month period, from when the report of the Equal and Human Rights Commission on anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, when that was published, and Jeremy was going in and out of the Labour Party, in that 2-month period, I got 90,000 social media messages, most of which were abusive. So it was horrible. And for him to say we were making it up or we were weaponizing anti-Semitism, all those accusations were just
90,000.
90,000 in a 2-month period. I don't see them. Community Security Trust, a very good voluntary organisation, vets all my social media. But some of it, which I do see, is horrible, absolutely disgusting and vile.
Just reflect, because it's gone so quickly and it's so interesting, but I just want you to reflect on being an MP when you were elected back in 1994 and the challenges then, and how the challenges have changed to being a Member of Parliament now. Is it the same job, basically?
No. Again, I didn't mean to become an MP. I always thought it was too pompous in Parliament. I never liked the pomposity of Parliament, and I like doing things. I'm a doer. I want to get things done, and I want to change the world. I don't want to sit there and debate endlessly and think and praise each other's thing. So things have changed, some for the better, and I'm always very wary of thinking, things were better in my day. So the thing that is much better is there are many more women there. We're much more diverse. We're beginning to be diverse in terms of people, brown and black people, and that's great. And younger people, we're much more. So all that is great, and that brings a sort of camaraderie and a different environment, which is terrific. I think that's one good thing that's changed. The other thing that has changed, which is good, is that some of the select committees in Parliament, I think now, are much more effective than they were when I arrived. So Parliament, in a sense, although there's been trying to haul that back under Johnson, Parliament has sort of flourished and flowered, really. And there's some really interesting collaborative work across the parties that takes place. And that's the third thing that's changed for the better, is that I'm now working on economic crime. In fact, you had us on your programme with Kevin Hollinrake.
Who would have thought it?
Who would have thought that? What is awful, and this is what really depresses me, is when I first came into Westminster, if there was ever a big occasion, you'd go into the chamber to listen to the debate. Whether it was Northern Ireland, whether it was Iraq, whether it was the crash, all these huge occasions, and you would hear incredibly powerful, well thought out considered speeches. And if there was disagreement, it was intellectual. I now can hardly bear to go into Prime Minister's questions, and I hate our debates because they've become, you know, schoolboy politics really, where actually all you do is try and sort of do over the other side, gain a point, and you know, slagging off the other side, rather than developing an argument and engaging in what are really legitimate, tough questions that we should be. So I hate that atmosphere. And I sort of feel a little bit, I was talking to another person the other way, who'd been around for a long time as well, that it's become, you come into Parliament almost to become a minister rather than actually feel you've cut, you know, we were value driven. Well, we were value driven. You know, you want to change the world, don't you? You want to make the world a better place. And that sort of goes slightly, you feel there's a careerist sort of a dimension and culture that has emerged, which I don't think is very good. But, and I can say this, in my mentoring of the younger generation, there are, particularly among the women, there are some absolutely stunning young women that are now emerging. And I sort of think about, and we talk very seriously about really difficult issues that the Labour Party has to confront, the country has to confront, government has to confront. And my hope is that actually the British people will get fed up of this horrible slanging match and culture that I think Boris Johnson encourages, because that's the sort of Bridgington Club politics that he's used to. And we will get back to really serious debate on the issues that in the end matter to the people who elected us and put us there.
Made a great contribution to public life. Been a fascinating interview and trip down memory lane with you too. Thank you, Margaret Hodge.
Thank you.
You can watch my Real Me interviews on our YouTube channel or catch them on the Real Me podcast. Listen wherever you get your podcasts from. Just search for GB News. Thanks for getting in touch today. Lots of you have strong views about a shorter school week. David says, has the world gone mad? We have a problem with kids not being able to read or write properly. Alan says we should be extending the teaching time kids get, especially after all the missed learning. Julie messaged in, pupils are leaving school without the necessary basic language skills. So to have a discussion about a 4-day week is just ridiculous. Up next, it is On the Money with Liam Halligan, and he's with me now. You've got a great show coming up, haven't you?
Well, Gloria, we're interviewing exclusively Michael Gove, who's the Housing Secretary, Levelling Up Secretary. He's agreed to do a live interview into the show. We're talking about housing in the main, but of course the conversation will range across other controversial policy areas, fracking, for instance. And also I'll be asking him about those by-election defeats for the Conservative Party and politics in general. Hopefully he'll be interesting. He usually is when he sits down for an interview. And this is one that should trouble the headline writers.
Brilliant stuff, brilliant. You have been watching or listening to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. I'm back tomorrow at noon. We've got a great show for you tomorrow. First, here's your weather.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather updates. A mix of sunshine and showers today, with the showers mostly this afternoon across the east, with a cool breeze for most parts of the UK. Low pressure is dominating this weather front, bringing the showers today, but more lurking out in the Atlantic. They'll bring more wet weather to western areas tomorrow. But for the time being, the rain is clearing from the west. Some heavy downpours earlier for northwest England and southwest Scotland, but turning a bit drier here this afternoon. Not completely dry, still 1 or 2 showers, but the main focus for showers, of course, eastern England and northeast Scotland, where some heavy thundery downpours are possible. Much of South Wales, southwest England, Northern Ireland, dry and bright through the afternoon, but not particularly warm. We could just squeak into the low 20s across the east. Quite a cool breeze, especially on western coasts. The showers in the east will keep going well into the evening across Aberdeenshire, Norfolk too, but tending to clear away, and then that next weather system that we saw earlier pushes in from the west, turning into a pretty wet night for Northern Ireland and a very wet start to Tuesday across western parts of Scotland. Elsewhere, for England and Wales, mostly dry through the night and turning quite cool across central and eastern England, with Temperatures down to single figures, but plenty of sunshine here to start Tuesday. Much of eastern England will have a fine, bright and quite warm day tomorrow, whereas it's going to be a very wet start for Northern Ireland. The rain only slowly clearing here and lingering for much of the day in southwest Scotland. That rain could cause a few issues as it really builds up through the day. Turning wet in West Wales and the far southwest of England as well. And again, cool in the west, quite warm in the east, where we see the lengthiest spells of sunshine. That rain will continue to only trickle its way further eastwards as we head through Tuesday evening, and it's tied into an area of low pressure. You can see there the swirls of showers moving around that, and that's what we're in for during Wednesday and Thursday. Some heavy showers across the UK, turning a bit drier, certainly across the south for Friday and into the weekend.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.